Interactions with the metadata catalog to retrieve or update persistent state information are done through a query. The iRODS data grid provides a catalog interface that maps queries to the protocol required by each type of database. The queries are constructed in the iRODS rule language and sent to the catalog interface. The catalog interface then maps the query to the syntax required by the database. This approach improves security, avoids malformed queries being sent to the database, and controls access to the database. Queries are typically issued within a rule to retrieve persistent state information from the metadata catalog. A list of all the persistent state information attribute names is provided in Appendix D of the Policy Examples Workbook. Any of the listed attributes can be retrieved. The select microservice is used to compose a query which is stored in a workflow variable as a string. A for each loop automates execution of the query and management of the query result list. Each element of the result list can be examined and used to control operations. For very large query results, the iRODS data grid packages the result list in sets of 256 elements. The for each loop automatically loops over the sets of elements, providing a simple way to interact with very large lists. The result list elements are structures that contain all of the persistent state information attributes specified in the select microservice. Variables are extracted from the result structure and stored in workflow variables before they are used in operations. Thus, the query is stored in a string workflow variable, and the results from the query are stored in a list of structures. The query syntax is select, list of persistent state variables, where, condition on state variables. The list of persistent state variables is a comma-separated list of persistent state variable names. The condition on state variables specifies the operation that is applied to the state variables. Possibilities include equal, find objects that have the specified value, like, find objects whose name contain characters specified by a wildcard %, and find the objects that satisfy both of the specified conditions. The objects that are returned by the query may be file names, or usernames, or resource names, or any persistent state variable depending upon the entities defined in the list of persistent state variables. Operations can be performed upon the list of selected persistent state variables by the database. The operations include sum the persistent state variable values, count the number of items of that variable, order, create an ascending alphabetical sort on the attribute values, order-desc, create a descending alphabetical sort on the attribute values. Alphabetical sorts are used since all persistent state variables are stored as string. The data grid infers relationships between the persistent state variables that are used. Thus, a collection can be queried to find all of the files that it contains. *q equals select data name where call name equals *call. Note *call is listed in single quotes. Here *call is a string workflow variable that contains the full path name to a collection in the data grid. Note that all of the persistent state attributes are stored as strings in the metadata catalog. The result of the query is a list of file names within the specified collection. A query that returns the size of a file within a collection is given by *q equals select data size, where data name equals *file and call name equals *call. To find a specific file, both the data name and call name must be specified. The path to the file in the data grid is *call/*file. The data size is returned as a string. It should be converted to a floating point before arithmetic manipulation is done, such as the following. For each *r and *q, *a equals w *r dot data size. Here the dot operator is used to extract the data size from the element in the list result structure. A query that sums the sizes of the files in a collection is *q equals select sum data size where call name equals *call. The total size is returned in the result structure in the same position as the persistent attribute variable is located. To count the number of files in a collection, Star Q equals select count data ID, where call name equals star call. In this case, the number of files should be converted to an integer workflow variable. After the query is formed, a for each loop is used to execute the query and loop over the result list. In this example, the file names in a collection are found and listed. Star Q equals select data name, where call name equals star call. For each star R in star Q, star file equals star R dot data name. Right line standard out file name is star file. The dot operation is used to extract the file name from the result list structure and store the name in a string workflow variable. The output from this code will be a listing of all of the files in the collection with each file name on a separate line. You can specify more than one persistent state attribute within the query. To return both the file name and file size for all files in a collection, use star Q equals select data name, comma data size, where call name equals star call. For each star R in star Q, star file equals star R dot data name, star size equal double star R dot data size. Right line standard out, file name star file has size star size. The result list structure contains all of the persistent state information for each item in the list. In this case, each result element contains both the file name and the file size. An example to count the number of files in a collection is shown here. Star Q equals select count data name, where call name equals star call. For each star R in star Q, star num equal int star R dot data name. Right line standard out number of files is star num. Note that the result is converted to an integer. The right line statement will automatically convert the number back to a string before printing. Take 7 minutes to complete exercise 45. Write a query on your username to find your user ID. Use the dot operator to extract the user ID value. Use $username client to define your username. Please load your rule file into the lifetime library in the subcollection class INLS 624 by the end of today's class.